Hello, and welcome to another Block Chat. Today it's with me, Makram Hani. Dennis is busy preparing something so good for our community. If you're not a member of our community, join us. Feel free to join us on Telegram, Discord. Not that I'm always in Discord, however, our team does a great job there communicating with our community. Today, we'll be obviously talking so much real estate, and we'll definitely cover what have happened over the past few days. And we have some interesting stuff that happened. We have a new member of the team covering HR. We have Andy covering a conference. We have so much taking place. Today, as we said, we'll talk too much real estate. So, what I want you to do is if you think real estate and if you have questions on what are we doing and how does, because at the end of the day, the underlying asset is real estate whenever we tokenize, feel free to put your questions in the comments below, and it will be a pleasure to answer on this chat or on the coming one. Let's start with why real estate. I was playing Monopoly tonight with my son. It's night where I am in Dubai. And my son collected so much money. Yeah. So while we were playing, my son was collecting so much money. Obviously, as usual, I was collecting so much property. Now, my wife this time won, by the way. One of the very few times we let my wife wins, because sometimes my son kills us all. And some other times I play my luck and magic, whichever. However, my son was collecting money all through the game. And we ended the game, and my son said, I've collected so much money. Why didn't I win? And the answer was because you weren't cash flowing. So you were collecting money. However, every time you need to work for the money, and the amount of money you can collect doing that is limited. What would win you wealth is multiplication, is the effect of accumulation and compounding. That is what will grow your wealth. Thus, facilitating that and targeting that within your financial planning and within, and none of this is financial advice, by the way, it's just my opinion, my mere opinion. Doing that helps you hopefully achieve wealth that you currently do not get if you're just accumulating money. And I'm sure most of the people in our community and beyond do understand the value of purchasing property. However, I was having a chat today with a gentleman that I respect so much, not only because of him and who he is, but also because he's a property professional, a very seasoned property investor who've invested in plenty of countries. He's invested in Italy, he's invested in France, southern France, he's invested in successfully in Philippines, he's invested in Dubai. And we were having a chat, and I love those brainstorming sessions we had, and because every time he makes me wake up to something that I take for granted, or I make him wake up to something that he takes for granted. And today it was my turn to do so. We disregard usually the value of compounding, specifically when you're able to consistently and sustainably compound. Imagine you buy a property, you purchase an asset, whatever the asset was. Imagine that that asset can pay you in perpetuity, perpetual. And imagine that asset, while paying you, is still there and generally appreciating in value. Although the building may be depreciating in value, the whole overall asset will be appreciating in value. Just have a thought of that, specifically at such a time in our financial history globally. You know that times like this, with the high tides, I would call them, times of change, where many things are changing, none of us has clarity of what's coming. But there are things that stay. And a man that I respect so much, I'm not sure if it's Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger said it. I believe it's Warren Buffett. He said, the game today is not what will change. The game today is what will stay fixed, what will not change. And this is exactly what you should be looking at, and I should be looking at. We should be looking at what will not change. And one thing we know and will not change. And if it does change, hopefully this time it will change very positive. It's the ability of property to hold value in the long run. So when people look at me investing, I do okay in property, and they ask me about my target, I tell them generally my target is not to do the ultimate mistakes. So as long as I don't, regardless of what you buy in property, I'm in a business that can make me get lazy, because unless I do the ultimate mistakes, generally I will, even if dipped, I will recover. So if you purchase property, if you acquire that type of asset, you are able to sustain compounding revenues, because those revenues can be reinvested and reinvested and reinvested. And now I'll tell you a secret about the ability to reinvest in tokenized property and how. And reinvested until that revenue and what it generates is sustainable on its own and is wealth generating and compounding on its own. Let's say your name is Mark. Now, your name can be Joe, Mark, Muhammad, Makram, any name, whoever you are, Julia, whoever you are. Today, you have money. And let's say you have $100,000. That money today, in most countries, cannot buy you your ultimate property investment. Yet, we'll start by considering that that money from this moment is yours, is not yours, apologies, is your bank's. So if you're Mark, it's not Mark's money, it's Mark's bank's money. So Mark today, or Joe today, or Julia today should open a bank and a fund. So there is Mark's bank and Mark's fund. And Mark puts all the money that he's saving into his bank, and his bank deploys the money. Now the bank gives some of it to Mark's fund to invest it. Let's say it's $100,000. The options conventionally in front of Mark's fund is to deploy it into one property. In most situations, take more debt to be able to run that property successfully. Yet, you've purchased, acquired one property only. The risk is pretty high, not because property is risky, although there's risk in every investment, yet because all your eggs are in one basket. However, if Mark's fund is able to purchase or to deploy in 10 assets, it makes more sense without overextending themselves. So Mark's fund take this $100,000 and deploys it in $10,000 tranches in 10 properties. Now, let me go back to conventional. Mark purchased a property, paid the $100,000, maybe more from the bank, purchased the property, and then accumulated revenues. For Mark to redeploy those revenues in real estate, it would take him ages to collect another $100,000, because obviously $100,000 will not pay you $100,000 every year or two. While if you're looking at tokenized real estate, the $100,000, let's say, earns $7,000 a year. The $7,000 can be immediately redeployed, and that gives you the compounding effect. And again, I would take Charlie Munger here, and he says, if a business allows you to redeploy, reinvest all the money that it makes, that's the ultimate business. And then, regardless of how much money it makes, if it's able to reinvest the whole amount of money, it's doing amazing. And that is the compounding effect of you making your money work super hard for you and put your wealth on steroids. And then the 100,000, rather than waiting another 10 years to collect another 100,000 to deploy it again into a property, if property is what you understand or what you hope to understand, the next year you have 107,000 fully deployed. And the year after, you have 114-ish, call it 115 for ease of calculation, fully deployed. And then on you go. And that is possible with tokenized property. Now, there's many other benefits similar to if you needed money, you don't need to sell your whole property. You can sell the tranche you want of it. That is a very simple, interesting approach to property. Let's go back to Mark's bank, and let's call this bank the owner of the money, as we said. Mark does not anymore own the money. My money that I make is not owned by Makram, is owned by my bank. And I treat my bank fairly. I'll give you an example. If I'm borrowing from HSBC tomorrow, or me or my fund, Makram's fund, is borrowing from HSBC tomorrow, Makram's fund is obliged to pay HSBC, isn't it? And with interest, with profit. So Makram's fund is obliged to pay Makram's bank with profit, isn't it? So treat your bank fairly. So the fund that Mark had, the fund that you had a second ago, that you've built, should pay back your bank. And here you're creating solid entities that are powerful. Now, obviously, you can borrow from your bank to buy a car, or you can borrow partly from your bank and partly from another commercial bank out there. Remember, your bank should not lend you on anything that your other bank, your commercial bank out there would not lend you on. You need to match those standards so that you respect the money and the wealth you're generating. Now, some of you would tell me you've complicated our life here. I tell you, no, I simplified your wealth journey or your journey to wealth. Yeah, your life is still simple. You're still living your life. Actually, I've simplified it because if you think that way, it means you think that money generates headache. I'm removing the money off your hands. I'm giving it to a bank, set of standards, and runs from there. I'm giving the bank is deploying it through a fund or through other mediums, and then the fund deploys it on ground and makes money and makes revenues and makes returns. And obviously, you're enjoying that growing. So let me tell you, when I started buying real estate, what did I decide? I decided that I want to reach a point where, because each property I segregated, I said, this is a property, let's say it's 1 million. This property has its own bank account. The money of that property goes into that bank account and then needs to be reinvested and I said that I want to reach a point where my properties purchase another property a year. Imagine your properties are buying another property. So for your wealth to grow, it doesn't need you anymore. You need to be supervising. You're there, but you're not committed anymore to that. That process, that ability to generate that kind of wealth and reproduce through that kind of wealth is second to none. So think about it tomorrow this way. You are a wealth generating machine. Real estate is the right avenue for that if you understand it. Definitely research it, much more than you research for buying a shoe, because this is what people do usually. To buy a shoe, you research for 2 days. You try 10 of them. To buy a microwave, you research for a week. A dishwasher for a month. Yet to buy an investment of and use most of the money that you've saved in your life, 5 minutes. Your friend tells you something and you jump on it. And it's regardless of what it is. It could be stocks, crypto, real estate, or anything else. So research your property, research your market. What I'm telling you over here is real estate makes sense and is easier to understand on the basic level of it than other asset classes. And if you treat it this way, you don't need to be so smart to make money. I'm not smart. My money is. So if you follow that kind of discipline and you follow that kind of structure, your money has that kind of it's a sovereign entity, and it runs on its own with your supervision and direction and support until it reaches a point where it really can run partially on its own. There's nothing called totally passive. Passive is passive to a limit. Otherwise, it's out of control. So this is something you need to think of. And here comes tokenized real estate, real world assets in tranches where you can buy as much as you want whenever you want. Think about it. Think about you going in today, you have $100 on you. What could $100 generate for you today? In real estate, very little. But I'm sure $100 you can buy a share of a parking space and generate money and take that revenue and invest it or stake it and then generate more money. Think about it that way. Your real world asset is something that cash flows, tokenized, allows you to deploy easily and redeploy easily. And then as long as you're doing that, it makes sense. It makes sense to you, makes sense for your children after that. If you have someone in university, your daughter or your son are in university today, how about if you invest $100 for them a month in real estate? Today, it's not possible for you. But if you go through that, it is possible. So think about it that way. Now, obviously, let's talk about some other stuff similar to what have happened last week. Last week, by the way, some of the owners of the parking space have been able to sell their parking space tokens. I was lucky enough to be able to buy a little bit. And I wanted to buy much more, but we've agreed in the team that I don't do that because then I will buy everything in the market and then there will not be a market. So we've agreed that no, we will not buy any total order of any sell order that is available. So I've bought a little bit just because it's a small purchase, but because I want that part of that legacy. I wasn't an owner of that parking space tokens and I wasn't able to buy them before, and now I am able to buy them. So I went ahead and done it. Some other stuff that have happened. So those people, by the way, who are selling their shares of parking space still are making money, and hopefully they still own other tokens of this parking space. Some other things that have happened last week, and I believe very interesting stuff that we will talk about over the coming few weeks. And I will not kill it for you here, but I just want to tell you that there is a tokenomics research that is gonna take place or is taking place currently, headed by and created by Daniel, our head of risk, that is second to none, I would tell you. I've seen it, and I'll tell you it's amazing. For any real estate investor, it's amazing. And we will talk about it. We will have Daniel on a block chat talking about it. I'll not tell you its name now because it has a name. It's a structure that is fabulous for any property investor. So imagine you can tokenize your property. It will run through a risk profiling and through characteristics profiling for the asset itself, where you will have a better understanding of your property, and anyone who wants to look at your property will have a better understanding of the property as well. This tells you something. At our team, we're looking at the real asset, the underlying asset, rather than just looking at creating the technology and deploying it. No, it's way beyond that. And this came, by the way, in a conference that I was part of in Dubai, the 2 days that passed. It's called a proper PropTech Festival, and the 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 kind of energy that surrounds today anything Web3 is fabulous. But what's more fabulous is when you see that you're way ahead of the curve. So when people are asking, is there legislation for that? And you say, there is some legislation, much more is yet to come. However, we have the technology. It's deployable today. So if you have the right legislation in your jurisdiction, you're able to deploy it. And still, you're able to deploy it without the full sets of regulations, but with part of the sets of regulations that is available. And there is things you can do to stay regulated, because we want to always be regulated. We want to always be running as per the book and as per the law. However, you can do it already. So that kind of energy motivates us to push forward and push further. What I talked about in that conference is tokenization and how is it helping the REITs and crowdfunding solutions evolve. I will not tell you much about it. Hopefully, we'll publish pieces of it over the coming few days. Yet, what I will tell you is, when I was doing that research, because every time you research, you come up with knowledge that you didn't realize well enough and you didn't give enough value to. I discovered that we are a perfect solution in all aspects to every REIT and to every crowdfunding solution. And I'll not spoil it all for you, but I'll leave it for that to take place. Last but not least, because I don't want to make it so long for you seeing one face and my face. It's not so pleasant, probably. Thank you for everyone in the community who've been part of the journey, who've been an owner of a parking spot, for those who are tokenizing today, for those who are testing the future, and for those who are purchasing, because there are purchasers of parking spot tokens today as we speak. What I want to tell you also is we have added some members of the team. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but we've added someone who will take care of HR. Hopefully, will be with us on a spotlight soon. So hats off to the whole team and the dynamic that is happening today. Andy was in a conference in Europe. As per Julia, every conference in Europe calls itself the biggest conference in Europe, but he's done amazing. He's been on an AMA last week or this week, the beginning of this week. Time flies very fast. Another thing is we have finalized the rollout of version 04. People are staking since few weeks now, are staking liquidity, and I advise people who haven't started yet to do so, because the kind of returns on that today are amazing. And Dennis is sending me a message. How is it going now? It's going amazing. Thank you all for being with us on this block chat. I wish to see you next week, hopefully with Dennis Petrovicic and Daniel. We'll grab Daniel, hopefully while he's in Ljubljana in Slovenia on. Thank you all for being part of our energy. On another block chat, it's